Well, today we are going to continue talking about wind and waves. So far, we've looked at all sorts of storms and natural things that can happen on this earth when it comes to storms and waves and water. And so today we're going to continue that with what has been stuck in my head as the mother of all storms. I don't know if that resonates for anybody, but we're actually going to talk about Noah and the ark today. And this is a story that probably a lot of you have heard. You've probably thought a lot about the animals and Noah having them march 2 by 2, if you've ever read one of those kids' books. But today I'm going to ask that we look at it a little bit different. Last week, Caleb said that the main point of all of the messages of the wind and the waves is that God is with us in the midst of it. And I think that can't be more true than with Noah's story, because Noah wouldn't have been able to make it. I mean, the fact that a boat could survive a storm that lasted 40 days and 40 nights with water springing up from the ground and coming from the sky is not a small feat. And so God was definitely in the midst of that. But there's something particularly that we're going to pull out from this particular story. So if we can go to the passage. There we go. So we're going to read in Genesis 6, 5 through 22, if you want to follow along. The Lord observed the extent of human wickedness on the earth, and he saw that everything they thought or imagined was consistently and totally evil. Yikes. So the Lord, sorry, you get Holly commentary when she reads it out loud. So the Lord was sorry he had ever made them. In some versions it said God grieved over them because of what they were. Made them and put them on the earth. It broke his heart. And the Lord said, I will wipe this human race I have created from the face of the earth. Yes, and I will destroy every living thing, all the people, the large animals, the small animals that scurry along the ground, and even the birds of the sky. I am sorry I ever made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, the only blameless person living on the earth at the time, and he walked in close fellowship with God. Noah was the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now God saw the earth had become corrupt and was filled with evil. God observed all of this corruption in the world, for everyone on earth was corrupt. So God said to Noah, and I'm going to stop there just for a second. I don't know about you guys, but if you're ever reading in the Bible and it repeats itself, we have a tendency to kind of glaze over it. Like, all right, I got it. You've already said this. Let's go on. But in the Hebrew, there's actually something really important when something is repeated. It's their way of saying, hey, if you didn't catch it the first time, catch it the second time. And so it's almost their way of saying, no, really, they were really bad. Like, no, seriously? Like, they really, really messed up. And so when you hear in the Bible something repeat itself, think of it like that. It's God's way of trying to tell us over and over again something that he wants us to know. And I thought a lot about this, like, why does God want us to hear repeatedly that these people are evil, that they're bad and they've messed up? And then it hit me. It's because God wants us to realize he didn't do this without intentions. Like, we have a God who does everything out of intentions. And he does nothing just because he can. And so he repeats this message over and over that these people are wicked, because he'll say it twice here, he'll say it later in the chapters, because he wants us to understand that, like, no, really, I have really good reason in what I'm doing, and that's because these people are wholly against me. And so I want you to kind of cling to that as we read through, because otherwise Noah's story is super depressing, because all of the earth is wiped out. And it's supposed to be for us. It's supposed to kind of hit us between the eyes and go, oh dear, that's bad. But God wants us to realize that, like, no, really, I'm doing this because this is what has to be done. And I'm doing it, and I'm going to tell you my reasons why over and over and over. So by the end, you're with me in the fact that I'm saying, no, these people really are wicked, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. So we continue with Noah's story here, who, in juxtaposed to the evilness going on, definitely stands out. I don't know for you guys, but does for me. Because it's like, they're all bad. Ooh, hey, he's kind of good. They're all bad. Ooh, he's good. So kind of follow that with me as we go along. So God said to Noah, I have decided to destroy all living creatures, for they have filled the earth with violence. Yes, I will wipe them all out along with the earth. Build a large boat from cypress wood and waterproof it with tar inside and out. Then construct decks and stalls throughout its interior. Make the boat 450 feet long, 70 feet wide, and 45 feet tall. Leave an 18-inch opening below the roof all the way around the boat. Put the door on the side and build 3 decks inside the boat, lower, middle, and upper. Look, I'm about to cover the earth with a flood that will destroy every living thing that breathes. Everything on earth will die. So there again, God is repeating himself. But I will confirm my covenant with you. So enter the boat, you and your wife, and your sons and their wives. Bring a pair of every kind of animal, a male and a female, into the boat with you to keep them alive during the flood. Pairs of every kind of bird and every kind of animal and every kind of small animal that scurries along the ground that will come to you to keep you, to be kept alive. And be sure to take on board enough food for your family and all the animals. And Noah did everything exactly as God had commanded him. That's a lot of Bible, but Noah's story will actually go on for chapters, so this is just a short chunk of it. As we find out, Noah will actually be on the boat for about a year with all of the animals before the waters recede and he's able to go back. And he will be the only one to enter the boat, him and his family. And I don't know about you, but I read some of this stuff sometimes and I'm like, man, why is God so specific with these instructions? Like, what happened if it was 451 feet? Like, what if he brought 3 of the doves instead of 2? But I think it's so cool that we have a God who tells us exactly what he wants and exactly what he needs. And so in those moments when you think like, could we like round that or something? Try and think about it the other way, that no, this is something really cool. And so today, like I said, you've probably heard this story before and you've probably thought about the animals marching 2 by 2 and the waters coming and the dove getting the olive branch. But I actually want us to think about this story a little different today. I want us to think about it before the storm even hits and all the preparation that Noah had to do in order to have this boat be built. This boat was 450 feet long, which the only thing we can kind of compare that to is a football field. So literally, this boat is as big as a football field from goalpost to goalpost. And it's just about that big wide. Can you imagine, hey, by yourself, you have to go build this boat. I have to do what? It has to be how big? Are you sure? Can't it be like 45 feet? But I think there's 2 reasons God makes this boat so big. One is a practical reason, because he's going to ask all of the animals to have to be on it. So it has to be pretty big. But 2, the God that we have and the God that we love and the God that we serve is always doing everything out of a heart to beckon his people back to him. He doesn't want anyone to be lost in this storm. He doesn't want anyone to have to die and be part of this destruction. He wants them to come back to him. So he makes this boat so big that people can't help but see it. And they have to ask Noah questions. I don't know about you, but if somebody was building, like if my neighbor was building this boat, I'd probably walk up and go, hey, Noah, what are you doing? Especially because most scholars think this boat probably looked more like a coffin than an actual boat. And this is a time when boats probably weren't a thing. Like water now for us represents life. But actually back in the Old Testament, water represented death. So you didn't want to mess with it. Because most people couldn't swim. Most people couldn't go out in the water. So the fact that Noah's like, yeah, I'm going to build this thing that floats on water. People are like, you're going to do what? And who told you to do that? Are you sure? Are you positive? So I think God said, build this boat so big so that people would have no choice but to notice it. And most scholars think that it took Noah probably about 100 years to build this thing. This was not some little feat. Some scholars put it up to 120 years. Some put it down to about 80. But either way, this is Noah, day in, day out. Wake up, build the ark, eat, build the ark, go to bed, wake up, build the ark, eat, go to bed. Like, this is his life probably for 100 years. Can you imagine? And this is what God has asked him to do, because God knew that this is what Noah would have to do to survive this storm. And it's crazy because I think we don't think through all of the things Noah had to go through. The other thing that rang really clear to me in this story is that in order to build this boat, Noah probably went through shame and persecution like we can't imagine. Because the Bible tells us these people are wholly corrupt. So when Noah tells them, hey, I'm building this boat for God, they were probably like, who's that? Why does that matter? Are you sure? Because he doesn't really exist. Like, Noah was probably ostracized for having to do this. He was probably that weird guy. I mean, building a boat, what is that? So the physical, emotional, and mental things that Noah went through in order to enact what God has asked him to enact was huge. But I think it goes to serve as something really important that we can learn from today, is that we can weather storms. We can weather the mother of all storms if we're willing to listen to what God asks us to do it. And that's not always going to be easy. Like, we think following after Christ sometimes is a walk in the park. But Noah is an example of no. It took everything within him to build this boat. It took all of his resources. It took all of his time. It took 100 years of his life. Now, granted, he lived to be 600, so it's not quite the same as for us, but it's still, it's still a huge part of his life to do what God has asked him to do. And can you imagine for 1 second if Noah had said no? Like, seriously, if we take that thought real far, none of us would be sitting here. If Noah had said, no, God, I will not do what you've asked of me. That's too much. No, I will not bring 2x2 animals. Or no, I will not cover it in pitch like you've asked. But instead, Noah says yes. And it's out of him saying yes that he can weather that storm. And I think today it's really important for us that we grab onto that message, because I think God wants to walk with us in these storms. He wants to go before us. He wants to lead. He wants to guide us. But he can't do that if we're not willing to do what he asks in the midst of it. And so I want you to remember that for Noah's story. Like, that's the one thing we can cling on to. One, Noah has amazing faith. But two, we have to be willing to be Noahs in today's world in order to have his message be lived out. And there's a lot of things in that story that are really good if you've ever looked at Noah's story or thought about his story, but that's one of the things that I felt biggest. And I apologize, guys, I have to look at my notes, but so just keep in mind that's sorry. So when we think about everything that Noah went through, there's kind of a couple things we can cling on to, besides what I was saying. One of those things is that sometimes we're not the ones to create these storms. Like, Noah is the only righteous man, and that's why he endures this storm. He's not part of why the storm comes. He's not part of the reason why it's so big. He's not part of the reason why it takes over the entire world. But he's the only one who gets to survive it because of that. That doesn't take away the hard work he has to go through. That doesn't take away the pain, the toil, the suffering. But what it does is it means he has to go through it nonetheless. And so know that. I mean, Job is another example in the Bible where he didn't cause the storm that he's living in, but it comes anyway. And sometimes we in our life, even if we're living holy, righteous, are going to go through a lot of stuff. And Noah's an example of that. He goes through a lot of stuff because of what other people put him through. But he gets to live it, he gets to survive it, and he gets to come out on the other side because of his faith and love in God. And that's true for us too. Whether that happens on this side of heaven or on the other side of it, we get to have victory if we choose to follow God. Period. End of statement. And then, like I said, the biggest thing that stuck out to me is that if we're willing to do what God asks of us in the midst of a storm, we can weather it and we can ride on top of it instead of being tossed within it. There's a couple ways that we can do that. I don't know about you, but there's a lot of times I hear, well, that's a really cool message, Holly. What do I do with that? It's true, though. I mean, how many times you're like, yeah, I'd love to do that. How? What does that look like? And so there's a couple ways that we can do that. One of the ways that we can do that is reading our Bible, which is kind of the cliche thing to say, I know, but our Bibles can give us a lot of clarity and guidance. I remember when I first became a Christian, I was persecuted really bad by my family. I love them to death, but it was. I'm going to try not to cry, but they would yell at me and all sorts of terrible things. And so the Bible was like the one thing I could cling to that would help me get through it. And I remember reading in a passage one time, it said, I will turn fathers against sons and mothers against daughters. And it didn't change the storm. It didn't make it any less. But it brought clarity for me. It made me understand, hey, that's why I'm going through what I'm going through. Because I love Christ, and this is what he said it will come if I love him. But it made me feel like I could ride on top of the storm instead of in it. Another thing that we can do is we can live in a community like this. The people around you who love you and want to protect you on a spiritual level are the ones that can help you weather storms and can help you understand, hey, I know finances are really tough right now, but tithing might be the thing you need to do in the midst of it. And it might not make the storm feel any less sometimes, but it'll be the way that you weather the storm is by leaning on those who are around you. And the biggest way that we can lean on God in the midst of a storm and follow his direction is prayer, as continually seeking him out and seeing him in everything that we do. And prayer isn't just a one-way conversation. If I walked up to Jess all the time and just spat a lot of things at her and ran away, I don't think that relationship would last real long. I don't know about you, but I think it'd be pretty done. Like, oh, there goes Holly again. Okay, bye, guys. But prayer and a relationship is two-sided. And we often enough don't give God room to speak. We're like, hey, God, I got 5 seconds. You're going to get the 5 seconds, and I'm out. Let's go. But that's not what prayer should be. It should be a time of coming before God and allowing him to speak as well as you speaking. And it's hard to do. I am a person who does not sit still well, as I sit still. But anyway, it's so hard for me to be like, God, I'm just going to sit and be quiet. They're laughing because it doesn't happen. But I don't do it. But that's how we hear God's voice. That's how we get his direction, is allowing a place in our life for that silence, for you to come before him and say, God, I'm struggling. God, I can't do this. God, this storm is too big. Help. And letting him have the moment to speak and show you what that help looks like, how he can move in your life, what he wants you to do next to weather that storm. And sometimes that will come in a constant, okay, I'm going to set aside 10 minutes today to just be in silence. And sometimes it comes in just paying attention when you're driving down the road or when you're doing whatever you're doing. I know Nate's aunt told us a story of one time while she was driving down the road, and she was just in the fast lane for no apparent reason, and she heard this voice say, why are you in the fast lane? There's no need to be in this fast lane. No one's on the road. You should get over. And she did. And it's a good thing she did, because about 20 yards up was a truck parked in the fast lane with all of its lights turned off. And if she hadn't have gotten over, she would have smashed into the back of the thing. And that's a moment of listening, because if she hadn't, she could have been like, that's a weird thought, and just kept going. Because I think that's what we do to God a lot. We're like, yeah, that's a weird thought. Let's move on. But instead, we don't lean into those moments and be like, God, is that you? So those are kind of the ways that I've thought about how we can live this out, because I think God does want to instruct us in those times. And I think God does want to lead us and guide us and help us through these storms so we can float on top and not get swallowed up in the middle of it. But I think we have to be willing to listen. And I think as not just this church family, but as a church family in total, we've lost the ability to listen. And I think that's the only way we can weather these storms. And we will have them. Now, it may not be the end-all, be-all storm like Noah's. Praise Jesus that he gave us the promise of the rainbow. But there are storms in your life that you'll hit that are like this. And God can warn us of them. I know a couple years ago, I was walking home from class, and God gave me this understanding of like, hey, here's your dissertation topic. I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. Okay. And as I was walking home, I was like, my dissertation topic is on grieving. I was like, God, I've never grieved real good in my life. Does that mean it's coming? Like, what does that mean? And I kept that thought in the back of my head, like, here we go. All right, it's coming. And then about 2 years later, my dad passed away. And it hit me like a ton of bricks and affected me for a really long time because we had a very tumultuous relationship. But God gave me the understanding beforehand, hey, it's coming. And then I was able to prepare, and when it came, it was just a confirmation. It didn't make it any easier, good golly. But it helped me be prepared for the fact that, hey, it's coming.